Breaking news now as Fox reports live from Boston. I'm Bill Hemmer in tonight for Shepard Smith. We are watching an enormous development in the marathon attack. Only 2 hours ago, the FBI releasing video of two suspects at the scene of Monday's bombings, and they called them suspects. That video shows two men in baseball caps walking down Boylston Street in the direction of the marathon finish line. The FBI has named them Suspect 1 and Suspect 2. Suspect 1 wearing a dark hat, Suspect 2 a white hat. They're both carrying bags. And the FBI special agent in charge said that Suspect 2 in the white hat set down a backpack at the site of the second explosion in front of the Forum restaurant at 755 Boylston Street. Today, both suspects are perhaps the most wanted men in America. And you will see these images many times in the coming hours and days until these men are caught, so study them carefully. Because as the FBI put it today, somebody knows who these guys are.
We know the public will play a critical role in identifying and locating these individuals. Somebody out there knows these individuals as friends, neighbors, co-workers, or family members of the suspects. Though it may be difficult, the nation is counting on those with information to come forward and provide it to us.
Well, the FBI considers both men armed and extremely dangerous. If you know them or see them, you can let the feds know by dialing 1-800-CALL-FBI. Also on its website, bostonmarathontips.fbi.gov. We have Team Fox coverage with Catherine Herridge live in Washington. But first, want to go to Rick Leventhal here in Boston. And Rick, I think it says an awful lot that the FBI is releasing these images now. Good evening.
Good evening, Bill. Clearly, the FBI and the other members of the Joint Terrorism Task Force have spent the better part of the last 48 hours trying to identify and capture these two men on their own, and they weren't able to do that, and that's what clearly propelled them to release these images, letting these guys know that they were being hunted against trying to generate more intel and more information and possibly names and addresses for the two guys that we are now seeing in this video and in these still pictures. As you mentioned, they're only being identified as suspects number 1 and 2. Number 1 in the dark jacket with the dark hat with khakis and a backpack. Subject number 2 with a white hat worn backwards, also wearing a dark jacket and jeans. Suspect number 2 set down the backpack at the site of the second explosion and then went walking west on Boylston Street after planting that bomb. And again, the FBI encouraging people to call or contact authorities and not try to take these guys into custody themselves.
We consider them to be armed and extremely dangerous. No one should approach them. No one should attempt to apprehend them except law enforcement. Let me reiterate that caution. Do not take any action on your own.
Bill, the FBI has already processed thousands of leads and tips, and no doubt will get many thousands more.
Indeed, and they are set up for that, we do believe. Rick, anything else about these people that people rather should pay attention to that you're hearing?
Absolutely. Everyone should look at the hats these guys are wearing. I mean, it's possible they bought them only for that day, Monday afternoon, for the attack at the marathon. They should look at the jackets that they're wearing, and they should look at the walk. The one guy's walk might be distinctive to someone as you see them coming down the street. And people should remember why the FBI is hunting these two. And one of them, again, you can clearly see his profile in one of those photographs. And by the way, all of those photographs and videos that have been submitted, some people may not have submitted pictures that they thought would not be valuable to the investigation. Now seeing these guys, if you look at their hats, look at their clothing, look at their faces, perhaps you have a photo in your camera, if you were at the marathon on Monday, that would be even more valuable to the FBI, an even better angle of one or both of these men. You should forward that to the FBI. And here's more from the special agent in charge of the Boston office.
Identifying and locating those responsible is now our highest priority. No other details of the investigation will be released at this time because this is our focus now. It continues to be an ongoing, active investigation.
The FBI says it will continue to work to enhance the images that it has, Bill, but we can't stress enough how important other images might be to the investigation.
Yeah, and late last night, Rick, and you and I have had a lot of late nights the past week here in Boston, but your source told you something 2 days ago, you said, about a guy wearing a white baseball cap that was turned backwards. What do you recall based on that conversation now?
a source of mine who was with the Federal Bureau of Investigation was looking at a picture of what we believe is suspect number two wearing the white baseball cap backwards. He was describing that photo to me on Tuesday morning that had been circulated among the FBI, so they have known about this guy for the last couple of days. He reminded me that this suspect placed a bag next to 8-year-old Martin Richard. He was standing, the little boy was, on that metal barricade next to his little sister whose leg was blown off and his mother who had surgery on her brain. This guy, believed to be suspect number two, someone, the FBI believes it might be this person, placed that backpack down next to that little boy who was waiting to watch his father cross the finish line, and that little boy was killed, and his sister lost her leg, and his mother had to have surgery on her brain. And I think that people should remember that what this guy did resulted in 3 lives lost and nearly 200 horrific injuries, Bill.
And we remember all those victims again tonight here in Boston. Rick, thank you. Stand by there across town. Our Team Fox coverage continues with Catherine Harris. She is live in Washington now. What are they saying down there tonight, Catherine? Good evening.
Well, thank you, Bill. With the FBI calling for the public's help here in the U.S. and on an international basis, senior government officials telling Congress the investigation is wide open.
We don't know yet whether the attack was planned and executed by a terrorist organization, foreign or domestic, or if it was an individual act. Lone wolves, domestic extremists, and jihad-inspired or affiliated groups are certainly determined to attack.
Key bomb components largely intact, and the analysis by the FBI's crime lab in Quantico, Virginia, ongoing. Now at least 4 tracks in this investigation that we know of: the bomb components, the video, the stills, and then also social media, Bill.
You know, what more do we know about that social media? Because throughout the day, Catherine, you've been talking about the 24 hours before the bombs went off and the 24 hours that followed. What happened and what was gathered during that 48-hour period?
Well, an investigative source tells Fox News that there's, quote, a significant social media footprint that's providing new leads for investigators. More than 30,000 social media messages were collected within a 1-mile radius of the finish line from 24 hours before to 24 hours after the explosions. Messages that seemed out of place or coded, including tweets about 2 Boston hotels, were analyzed further.
In unconventional warfare, what you're starting to see more and more of is the use of social media to communicate, to spread messages, instead of using what we would typically see on a battlefield, which is radio communication.
One of the issues that we heard repeatedly here in Washington on Capitol Hill was whether this could be a lone wolf, but what's clear from the release of the photos tonight is that it was a conspiracy of at least 2 people, Bill.
Yeah, Catherine, stand by as well, because there was more to talk about, too, on the forensic side of this and also, you know, where this investigation goes. But, Rick, I want to mention this to you. Massachusetts State Police a short time ago tweeted the following, and they talked about suspect number 2 that you were just talking about. Suspect number 2 highlighted in profile. The tweet reads, note pronounced jaw, nose, dark hair, and then 1-800 call FBI with info. I think the point to be made here, Rick, is that they cannot solve this case without help from the public now, can they?
By the fact that they released these images and are asking for help, and obviously anyone who may recognize them should call the FBI. They're going to be getting a lot of false leads, Bill. They've had to deal with those over the last few days. That's common in any investigation, especially one that's this high profile. But you can see these men's faces. You can get a pretty good look at them. And if they spend any time in the Boston area or any time in the United States, then someone interacted with them. Any number of people might recognize them or think they know them. And those are the people that the FBI is hoping to talk to.
Yeah, Rick, also with Catherine marking the story, too, through her sources in Washington. Catherine, in some of these images, it's clear that at least suspect number 2 is talking on a phone. And one of the images, it looks like suspect number 1 is wearing earphones in his ears as he walks down that sidewalk. But specifically on the cell phone evidence, is it true that they can pinpoint every call at every moment of that hour of the day from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon? And if they can they trace it?
What we reported earlier this week here at Fox is that the FBI was scrubbing or scanning the cell phone tower records, looking for positive hits at the point of detonation. So in other words, were there phone calls that were going through those cell phone towers at the very moments that they know the bombs were being detonated? They can use that information to trace it back to a phone number. But any terrorist, because that's what these two people are, worth their salt, if they're using cell phones for a detonation, would be using disposable cell phones that they probably purchased at a convenience store. So even finding that number, if that was the method of detonation, is not necessarily going to lead back to an individual in this case, unless you have a super alert convenience store clerk who may remember these guys.
Yeah, and the investigation as it moves forward, you wonder, Catherine, why the FBI was quiet for 2 days. Is there a reasonable explanation, or what are we hearing about what explains that over the past 48 hours?
They haven't offered an explanation, but I think Rick would agree with me that our experience would tell you that things were moving at a very fast pace, and it was extremely fluid. And the decision to release the pictures has benefits if the subjects are identified, but there are also risks because it tips the FBI's hat to these individuals, and it may cause them to flee. But if we want to sort of look at what I think is the leading edge of this story now, is that there are two individuals, but they had to have some kind of help. It would be called a support network for their operation in Boston. Were these people part of the conspiracy, or were they sort of unwittingly helping these individuals, Bill?
And to that point, Catherine, the FBI agent in charge, and I'll bring Rick in for a comment on this as well, he said it might be difficult, but please come forward. Essentially, Rick, that was an appeal to family or friends that you may know these individuals, but we need to know who they are, and don't hold back.
And people need to be reminded of the horrors of that day and the pain and anguish and awful injuries that these two suspects allegedly inflicted. I mean, somebody put these bombs down there, and the FBI seems pretty sure that it's these two guys. And Bill, one other thing. There's been a lot of criticism about all these surveillance cameras that have been posted around all these big cities in America. If those cameras weren't there, they wouldn't have the images of these two guys, and it would have been a lot harder to track them down.
Well, Rick, thank you for that. Rick Leventhal, Catherine Herridge with me tonight. Back to both of them when we get more news that breaks throughout the hour here. In a moment, we will hear, though, from a man who has worked inside the FBI fighting terrorism and hear what he thinks of today's latest developments and the efforts to catch these two men. That's coming up tonight on the Fox Report, live from Boylston Street in Boston, only a few days after the marathon attacks that left 3 people dead, more than 170 wounded, and a city and a nation that is mourning for these 3 tonight.